Welcome to Global Challenge 213, 216, 4 years of right use of time, right use of mind. I'm Clarity Ross, bringing this big boost to you, and we're using right affirmations, which is right use of time, right use of mind. In this one, we're going to get into affirmations that cover some of the stronger efforts we make to teach the ego something, which is impossible. For example, we'll say deceit can't teach the ego anything. Deceit can't teach the ego anything. Deceit doesn't need to be deceit. Instead of deceit, oneness is seen. We can use lies. Lies can't teach the ego anything. Lies don't need to be lies. Instead of lies, oneness is seen. Deception, same as deceit, but let's use this form. Deception can't teach the ego anything. Deception doesn't need to be deception. Instead of deception, oneness is seen. Distortion. Distortion can't teach the ego anything. Distortion doesn't need to be distortion. Instead of distortion, oneness is seen. Guilt. Guilt can't teach the ego anything. Guilt doesn't need to be guilt. Instead of guilt, oneness is seen. Blame can't teach the ego anything. Blame doesn't need to be blame. Instead of blame, oneness is seen. Those are some examples. Displacement can't teach the ego anything. Displacement doesn't need to be displacement. Instead of displacement, oneness is seen. There are others that we use. A lot of different techniques. Projection. Projection can't teach the ego anything. Projection doesn't need to be projection. Instead of projection, oneness is seen. So we have these attempts, these tricky attempts to teach the ego something. Even these tricky attempts don't work. This is like trickeration. We can say trickeration, and you can use that as a word. Trickeration can't teach the ego anything. Trickeration doesn't need to be trickeration. Instead of trickeration, oneness is seen. So, let us practice those various forms of extreme trickeration that we try to use to teach the ego something. Even that stuff doesn't work, all right? We need to remind ourselves of that fact. So we use the format of the light and the fingers to practice here. Okay, so we're going to start off. What's an easy one? Lying. Everybody thinks lying can teach the ego something. We'll start with that. Lying can't teach the ego anything. Lying doesn't need to be lying. Instead of lying, oneness is seen. Distortion. Distortion can't teach the ego anything. Distortion doesn't need to be distortion. Instead of distortion, oneness is seen. Deceit. Deceit can't teach the ego anything. Deceit doesn't need to be deceit. Instead of deceit, oneness is seen. Projection. Projection can't teach the ego anything. Projection doesn't need to be projection. Instead of projection, oneness is seen. Blame. Blame can't teach the ego anything. Blame doesn't need to be blame. Instead of blame, oneness can be seen. Denial. Denial can't teach the ego anything. Denial doesn't need to be denial. Instead of denial, oneness is seen. Guilt. Guilt can't teach the ego anything. Guilt doesn't need to be guilt. Instead of guilt, oneness is seen. All right. Now we're going to do the three times three practice on guilt, because that's a big one. Let's try it. Guilt can't teach the ego anything. Guilt can't teach the ego anything. Guilt can't teach the ego anything. Guilt doesn't need to be guilt. Guilt doesn't need to be guilt. Guilt doesn't need to be guilt. Instead of guilt, oneness is seen. Instead of guilt, oneness is seen. Instead of guilt, oneness is seen. Okay. Now we're going to use the 3 times 3 on guilt plus embellishment. Embellishment a little bit. So this is even more profound. We can use denial. Let's use denial 3 times 3 with embellishment. Okay, so here we go. Denial can't teach the ego anything. Denial can't teach the ego anything. Denial can't teach the ego anything. Denial doesn't need to be denial. Denial doesn't need to be denial. Denial doesn't need to be denial. Instead of denial, the beautiful vision of oneness serenely arises right now. Instead of denial, let me do it one more time. Instead of denial, the serene dawning of the vision of oneness is seen right now. Instead of denial, the serene dawning of the vision of oneness is seen right now. Instead of denial, the serene dawning of the vision of oneness is seen right now. All right. So, to recapitulate this video, we used the various forms of trickeration that we think we can trick the ego into learning. If we can teach the ego something through trickery, trick it. We'll trick the ego. Denial, all this stuff. No, that doesn't work either. And then we used the 3 times 3 format, which is guilt, 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 3 times each part of the 3 parts of the affirmation. Reinforce it 3 times each. And then we use the embellishment of the last part, which helps give can help give a more personal, a more intense experience of it. Instead of denial, the serene dawning of the vision of oneness is seen, and we can say right now. Right now. So that brings it home. We'll do that one more time here. One more time with what shall we say? Distortion. Distortion. Distortion doesn't need to be distortion. No, wait, hold on. Distortion can't teach the ego anything. Is this on? Okay. Distortion cannot teach the ego anything. Distortion can't teach the ego anything. Distortion can't teach the ego anything. Distortion doesn't need to be distortion. Distortion doesn't need to be distortion. Distortion doesn't need to be distortion. Instead of distortion, the serene dawning of the vision of oneness is seen right now. Instead of distortion, the serene dawning of the vision of oneness is seen right now, this very instant. Instead of distortion, the serene and beautiful dawning of the vision of oneness is seen right now, this very instant. All right. This very instant. So, this embellishment can make it progressively. It's seen right now, it's seen this moment, it's seen this very instant. That brings it home even more. So we are progressing rapidly. The effectiveness of these affirmations, I've been test piloting them to see how it works, and it's fabulous. It's tremendous. It's the fast way. It is the fast way. And we need the fast way now. We need it. That is why I'm lending my time and effort and focus and dedication to these affirmations now. Whereas before I lent it to clarification, which is fast and helpful, but it's not the fastest way. Okay, I realize that it's not the fastest way. It's fast, but not the fastest way. And right now we need the fastest way. The fastest way. And because the world, we're about ready to try and teach the ego a big lesson and putting everything in, all the chips on the table. Let's see if we can use all the distortion, all the trickeration, all the unhappiness, all of the destruction, all of the whole potpourri of everything. Let's just all throw it into one big pot and see if we can get it big enough so that the ego can learn something. And it cannot learn anything, because there is no learner. We cannot teach the impossible. We cannot teach how to accomplish the impossible. It cannot be learned. If it can't be learned, what can learn how to accomplish the impossible? Nothing. Nothing's not possible. So this huge teaching moment we're about ready to bring, aiming it at the ego, trying to say, here you go, ego. This'll do it. This'll teach you. This'll teach you. It's futile. It's absolutely futile. So we need the fastest possible way to wake up and recognize, whoa, we don't need to do this. This is just complete waste of time. Utter folly. Total whimsy. Total whimsy. Again, we're not dealing with insanity. We're dealing with whimsy, which is a different cup of tea. At least the insane, you think you can lead them back to sanity. The whimsical? No. The only way to deal with our situation is to simply remind ourselves of the truth. And that brings us out of this whimsical attempt to become prime creator on our parts. So, very great. We'll see you in the next video.